I've always said that Halo Reach's campaign is the most solid in the entire franchise from a quality perspective. It has its standout moments, like every Halo game does, but unlike many of them, it doesn't feature any levels I'd describe as absolute stinkers and retains a fairly high bar throughout. ONI Sword Base is a part of Reach I'd point to as evidence of that. It's one of 4 or so levels that I'd describe as middling, and yet it's still a very entertaining experience from start to finish, albeit one that is unlikely to blow your mind. Being the second mission in Halo Reach, we don't have much story to catch up on prior to ONI Sword Base beginning. On the colony world of Reach, Spartan Noble 6 joins up with a squad of fellow super soldiers known as Noble Team to investigate a recent communications blackout in a remote agricultural region. Upon arrival, interference by insurrectionists is suspected, but the group are soon horrified to discover that rather than the disruption being caused by humans, it was actually the work of the Covenant. Noble Team fight them off and secure the area, at which point they are sent to defend an ONI research facility named Sword Base, which is where we'll jump into the action. ONI Sword Base begins with a briefing as Noble Team head towards the titular facility.
The Office of Naval Intelligence Sword Base is presently under siege from a Corvette-class Covenant vessel. Due to the sensitive nature of this facility, use of orbital rounds has been, for the moment, prohibited. Regrettably, my efforts to obtain relevant data on enemy forces have been unsuccessful. However, current defensive forces are insufficient. ONI has requested Team Noble's direct intervention to help secure Sword Base.
What's great about this opening is that the scenes you witness of Covenant and UNSC forces duking it out on the ground are rendered in engine, so will change every time you play. It's a detail you may not have even noticed, and I'd have liked there to have been a few seconds more footage of the firefight happening below to make it a bit more obvious. Maybe it's just me, but I really enjoy trying to spot the little differences in how events are unfolding every time I play. The level's opening encounter is a strong one, not just because it feels suitably epic as you land in an area you've just seen lit up with gunfire and plasma explosions while the track Sword Control booms in the background, but also because of the way Cat behaves. Like any good combat arena, you have 3 lanes to choose from. You can proceed at ground level through the middle of the area, or use raised walkways to the left and right. The sensible options are of course the paths leading round the edge of the battlefield, and I'd imagine those are the ones most will take. Whichever you choose, Cat and a few Marines will opt for the one opposite, ensuring the Covenant are surrounded no matter which direction you head in. This is something I didn't pick up on until making this video. I always go left, and so Cat always heads right, and it goes a long way towards making the encounter feel more dynamic, like it's not just the area you are in that is playing host to the action. Speaking of going left, there's a reason why I always do that, and that is because of the sniper rifle you can grab towards the end of the walkway. This level features a ton of instances where Bungie leaves weapons best suited for the combat you're involved in a convenient place, although you do often have to be observant. On this occasion, for example, you collect the sniper rifle and then are able to immediately use it to your advantage to shoot down range at the final group of Covenant. I'll highlight a few more places where Bungie does this as we move through the mission. With the area now Covenant-free, your next task is to clear the surrounding hills with a target locator on offer to help expedite that task.
Noble 2 to Sword Control. Courtyard is clear. Over.
Head for the main gate to the east. I'll brief you as you go.
Sword Control, I see a target locator. Any artillery support in the area?
Limited, but we'll prioritize whatever you need, ma'am.
The scripted moment which follows, depicting a troop transport being blown up by a wraith, is great, and I like that you're able to call in artillery to avenge your fallen comrades straight away. However, I think it's a shame the target locator doesn't have a bit more utility throughout the level, as it's a very different tool from usual. I suppose it's a tricky one for you to hold on to for any amount of time, as you'd then be limited to only a single proper weapon in a sandbox expressly designed for Spartans carrying 2. You have a choice of where you want to head next. If you take the road to the east, your first task is to get a comms array up and running again, while travelling west leads you to an anti-aircraft gun which needs to be brought back online. I always love any section where Bungie allows you to choose the order you tackle your objectives in an open area. The series has pedigree in this regard too. Its second ever level, Halo, features 3 groups of stranded Marines you can rescue in whatever order you see fit. Later in Reach 2 during New Alexandria, Bungie continues to experiment with the concept. You aren't able to choose which objective you tackle first, but are instead at the mercy of randomization across another open area. If Bungie had remained with the series, this less rigid structure of mission design is I think what they should have continued to further explore. In Halos 4 and 5 we got better graphics and perhaps a bit more scale, and Halo Infinite followed the open world trend. But I think what would have worked best for the series post-Reach would have been adding more opportunities to choose how you complete a mission. Linear, more directed sections would still need to be a part of any Halo campaign, there's no denying that. But equally, I think carefully managed freedom and the inclusion of more Covenant and human AI to expand the series in scale, but not to the extent of it becoming open world like Infinite, would have been a home run. The encounters at the comms array and the anti-aircraft gun are decent enough. You're never too far away from finding a rocket launcher, like this one towards the top of the comms array, or a sniper rifle, in just the right places to help you get through things, and the introduction of the Revenant is a particular highlight. It's one of my favourite vehicles to pilot. What makes the 2 objectives and the wider area stand out most for me, however, is the contrast between their aesthetic during ONI Sword Base and what remains of them during later mission, the package. I've heard criticism of both missions for using the classic Bungie backtracking technique, and that's not unreasonable. The first half of the package is set entirely in areas you've already visited. I do though wholeheartedly believe it to be one of the better examples. If you look at how much changes between, say, Assault on the Control Room and 2 Betrayals in Halo Combat Evolved, it's not a whole lot beyond the enemies and vehicles you come across. The same could be said of the Storm and Floodgate in Halo 3. Both offer quite different experiences, but the environment doesn't change that much, at least during Floodgate's early stages. By comparison, the destruction which has taken place between ONI Sword Base and the package is shocking. By the time you arrive at Reach's latter half, the Covenant's glassing of the planet has caused glaciers to melt, with the comms array nearly completely submerged in water as a result. Nearby, where the anti-aircraft gun once stood, 2 of the Covenant's own gigantic armaments sit there in its stead, watching over a landscape which has been completely and utterly laid to waste. The transition is also felt as acutely as possible due to the stark changing colour palette Bungie introduces for the game's second half. Where once there were glaciers and cool blue waters, the sky instead burns orange as the planet falls apart. Long story short, the payoff for the repetition is a lot larger than other examples similar in nature, like those I just referenced, and it all begins with ONI Sword Base. Once both objectives have been completed, you're called back to the facility itself.
Noble Strike, this is Noble Leader. Get back to Sword Base ASAP.
On our way, Commander. 6, let's go.
And the return leg is rather a fun one, as you get to blast your way through Covenant reinforcements using the only Warthog equipped with a cannon which appears in the game. After battling your way back to the base, your path is blocked by a pair of hunters, although there are plenty of shotguns on hand to help make the encounter a little less daunting. Reach's hunters might just be the best balanced in the series too. They are extremely threatening and can cause real damage if you don't have your wits about you, but their same old weaknesses are still present to be taken advantage of as long as you keep a cool head. ONI Sword Base's final third is centred around clearing the upper levels of the facility so that longswords have enough space to help drive back the Covenant Corvette, which has loomed in the skies above since the start of the mission. This section isn't the most exciting in terms of its design, but George and June arriving on the scene and the introduction of the squad mechanic adds a pair of welcome twists on the traditional Halo moment-to-moment gameplay. I'm sure most of you watching this are familiar with how the squad mechanic works. Essentially, it allows you to team up with Marines who will follow and assist you as you slowly push your way forward. They're definitely necessary too, given the staggering number of Covenants you have to contend with. It's another example of how Bungie was still learning how to perfect the series formula right up until their time with it ended. They've always been able to do larger environments extremely well, but interiors or narrow sections could sometimes be a bit more variable, a bit more hit and miss. In Reach, there are few, if any, indoor areas which I'd highlight as being frustrating or repetitive. Journeying to the top of the building also creates a lovely piece of additional contrast between this mission and the package. In ONI Sword Base, you venture to the top of the building, while in the package you head downwards to where the Forerunner ship is located instead. Reaching your final destination, your last task is to use a rocket launcher to clear out Banshees and a dropship, leaving the skies clear for the UNSC to launch a counterattack. As you can see, it's one which is rather effective, another one of those little moments designed to continue building up your confidence before the fall of Reach accelerates once the game hits its midway point.
Beautiful, ain't it? Someone should take a picture. Nice work, by the way.
I aim to please.
5, 6, get down to the science wing. Dr. Halsey wants a debrief and command saying we're all hers.
Repeat? Sounded like you said Halsey.
I did.
Copy that, on our way. Don't need command to tell me. Been all hers half my life.
The conversation shared between Noble Team and Dr. Halsey shortly after is both excellent and irritating in equal measure. I love the interactions between George and Halsey, which feel a lot like a mother and son interacting, as they would given George is the only Spartan 2 of the group. I also like Carter's referencing of the winter contingency to bring Halsey down a peg or two, yet another example of the assured, confident attitude which was no doubt a big part of why he was chosen to lead the team. I'm not such a fan of the whole latchkey discovery idea.
Professor Sorvat's final entry in his field notes made reference to a latchkey discovery. Latchkey, not a word he would use lightly. So let's hope that the data module your Lieutenant Commander stole contains it.
My reason being is that it's seemingly such a huge find, one that is pivotal to Reach's story, and yet it's never really explained in as much detail as I would have liked. It's not a huge complaint considering how excellent the game's story generally is, but I would have liked there to have been a bit more meat on those particular narrative bones. With the base successfully cleared of Covenant, at least for the time being, and the Corvette no longer a problem, ONI Sword Base concludes. It is an entertaining experience which features plenty of solid Halo gameplay and the occasional excellent moment in both story and gameplay terms, which doesn't do a whole lot wrong. No matter what shooter you play, whether it's Halo or something else entirely, there are always going to be missions designed to set up events rather than to act as a crescendo, and ONI Sword Base is definitely one of them. As mentioned during this video's introduction, however, the fact that it's still great fun to replay despite not being up there with the best Reach has to offer is actually something of a plus point for the game as a whole. When your less exciting levels are still affairs many, including myself, really look forward to, you're set up for an extremely high quality campaign indeed. Thanks for watching the video, boys, girls and Spartans. If you had a good time, do consider liking, subscribing and sharing your thoughts. It would be great to hear from you, and fingers crossed we'll see each other again soon.